EAGLES, Eagles.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome in to Football Friday edition of Birds 365, our last off-season Football Friday. Next Football Friday will be about as real of a Football Friday as it gets for July, at least, and we'll have training camp starting up next week, just 4 days away from the Eagles report. And Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Friday morning, man? Good to be with you.
Good to be here. Yeah. Gearing up, looming. It always seems overwhelming this time of year, but once you get into it, it'll settle down pretty quickly. Good to get back into real discussion instead of speculation too, as well. So
Absolutely.
It'll start to clear up early in the process, and we'll see where this team goes. But hey, I always tell fans the best you can hope for is to be relevant. And it seems like the Eagles are always relevant, and generally for most of the Jeffrey Lurie era. So, and then you let the chips and you try to make runs in specific years as they've been able to do. But they're going to be relevant, and that's a good starting platform.
Great starting platform for the Eagles. They certainly will be relevant this year. Even if they stink, John, they're going to be relevant because everybody's going to be talking about them.
Oh, wow, yeah. But I don't mean it from that standpoint.
No,
You're right. But I don't. I mean, they're going to be a good team. It's just a matter of good versus great, and part of that is going to be interesting because as I get closer to camp, I like to reach out to some people and text them and see. What they're thinking, and and this is kind of a perfect callback to yesterday's show where we had lucky to enough to have Aaron Schatz from DVOA fame and Zach Berman, and you saw kind of the two different spectrums of the two different windows. Like Zach mentioned, and he's right. The Eagles believe, and by the Eagles, I mean Howie Roseman, the personnel staff, the scouting, they believe they have a championship level roster. And that means the expectations are big for everybody, starting with Nick Sirianni. And that's why you say, all right, this is, it's big season or bust. I'm not going to say Super Bowl or bust, but big season or bust for Nick Sirianni, or he's going to be in a different city. Bottom line, and then you take it from Aaron's perspective, looking at it from more of an analytic standpoint. Number 14, that's close to middle of the pack. And that's the wide berth you have. Right. The Eagles think they have a championship level roster. Some other people say, linebacker. We talked about extensively.
I think Howie and Jeff know about that, though. Look, I don't think they're turning a blind eye to the defense, because I don't think the defense is bad, but the defense is certainly unproven, and there's a lot of players that need time to develop.
But Jeffrey and Howie have been around long enough to know those questions are not going to be answered all positively.
Oh, 100%.
So it's
I kind of view it like the defense is, I don't want to say it was rebuilt, but you're almost like a couple years behind on defense compared to where you are on offense in terms of you drafted Jalen and Devontae. Now they've had the time to grow. You brought in A.J. Brown. Like, a lot of our young draft picks are still growing on defense. That's what I was talking about it last night. Yeah, they're not the best defense in the league right now, but I feel pretty confident and comfortable with the way they've rebuilt the defense to this point. It's not going to work right away. I mean, you got a bunch of young players. You got young players all over the roster, especially on the defensive side of the football. It's going to take some time. I think Howie and Jeff know that.
They might know it before the games start. But we know the expectations, and we know where they are, specifically, Jeffrey, when you don't reach those expectations. So I think if they take the to steal a phrase from Nick Sirianni, if they take the 30,000-foot view when the emotion is removed, I think you're right. But in the middle of the emotion, I don't think you're right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So, have they overrated this roster? I think they have a little bit because, like I said, from my perspective, I said, to me, it starts with Detroit and San Francisco and the NFC. Now, you're still probably number 3. Aaron kind of talked up the Cowboys a little bit, which didn't make him the most popular person on Birds 365, but I'd put the Eagles above the Cowboys, at least going into the season, but I wouldn't put them above Detroit or San Francisco. Doesn't mean they can't get past them, and if you think you have a championship level roster, which is pretty clear, and that's coming from more people than Zach Berman, it's pretty clear that's what the Eagles think. And then you start to, as you mentioned, Bill Colarulo was the one who ran down the litany of defensive question marks. Don't even talk about the defense. The offense, you're changing coordinators again. And when you change both coordinators, that generally takes some time. Nick Sirianni doesn't have any time. And in theory, because Nick Sirianni doesn't have any time, Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio may not have any time. So, these expectations may limit what the Eagles can do. They may force them to do things they shouldn't do. Howie's got to understand, he was talking about playing some of the younger players and thought they should have done that last year. And Zach talked about that yesterday as well. Everybody remembers Nolan Smith, but it also related, where are we now if they bit the bullet with Tyler Steen instead of playing Suo Pettit? Maybe Tyler Steen's a more proven option. Maybe he's not the option and you go in a different direction. These are the kind of things when you don't play young players, you don't get these answers. Now, if you're Nick Sirianni and you're getting pulled one way, like I advocate getting Quinyon Mitchell out there.
Yeah.
Maybe Isaiah Rodgers is more ready because he's got experience. Well, if you're the head coach and you got to win games, you might have Max Sharping out there instead of Tyler Steen. You may have, insert name. It's a catch-22,
right?
And
that's part of the reason that we have a problem. Well, at least I do. I mean, I think you do too, with the setup. Like, if you were going to bring Nick Sirianni back, then I think he should be given. If you decided to bring him back, which they did, he should at least be given the proper chance to turn it around. If you're expecting great results in 8 games with 2 new coordinators and a bunch of new guys on defense or young guys, I think that's unfair.
It is unfair, but that's the expectation.
Yeah.
Well, now, it doesn't matter if you rebound. If you're 4-4, look, the sky's going to be falling and everybody's going to be calling for Nick Sirianni's job, and they're not going to fire him in season. So he's going to have a full 17 games to turn it around. And if you end up with 11 wins, but you make a playoff run because you get better and better, he's going to have, that's his rope. I mean, it's not going to be an in-season thing unless they're 0-7, which they're not going to be, unless it's a complete disaster. So he's going to get a full season. But it's kind of like, we criticize the Cowboys for not signing their impact players early, and Jerry Jones taxing himself essentially. And the human nature aspect of, Dak Prescott's still good and he's still on the Cowboys, and CeeDee Lamb's still good and he's still on the Cowboys, and Micah Parsons is still good and he's still on the Cowboys. So they have these good players, but maybe they're upset. Maybe they're not playing at an optimal level because they feel disrespected. Could go down 100 routes with that, because human nature is real. Well, in the case of the Eagles and the coaching and what they've done here, I think it's valid to criticize them because of the path they've taken and all the potential pitfalls along the way. And some I've just explained. It's like, well, he's got to win. There's no. So you can't say, well, Nick, you essentially highlight everybody around the NFL. For those who don't think Nick's got to win to keep his job, including, by the way, Nick Sirianni.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it. So, how do you talk out of both sides of your mouth? Oh, by the way, Nick, can you play the young players as well? If you're Howie Roseman, well, you can, but doesn't make a lot of sense from Nick's perspective. If you got a veteran guy who's only going to be here 1 year and he might give you a little bit more, but long term, you'd be much better off. Tyler Steen being the perfect example from last year. You'd be much better off learning something about that particular player. Nick's got to win.
Yes, he does. No doubt about it, Johnny Mac. Look, I think the team is good. I think where the roster is not as good as those other two teams you mentioned in the NFC is it's not as balanced across the defense and the offense. I think they're a little, the offense has a ton of talent. The defense is a little bit of a different story. But look, we'll see how it all plays out, man. Just 4 days away from them reporting. I haven't done the countdown. Let me see if I can do it real quick off the top of my head. Today is what, the 19th? So you're coming down 49 days away, John, until the Eagles opener, man. They only have 49 days to figure this out and get it right. So let's see if they're able to do it. Johnny Mac, we have been doing our camp previews, our training camp previews. We have gone through basically every position on the team. We have the safety position left, so we will do that. Now we'll finish up that. And then we also have special teams to do, which we will either do today or we'll do it on Monday, depending on where we are. We have Gary Cobb coming up in hour number 2, so we'll have Gary Cobb. We don't have him off. We don't have him off on.
Well, he's usually on Cilio. We've had him before, Jody and I. But
yeah, we've had him before, but we don't get him too often here. So I thought it'd be a different perspective, a different look to Gary Cobb on this show compared to the afternoon show. So good stuff. We'll have Gary Cobb. Looking forward to that. I want to welcome everybody in this morning. John, I was worried some of our people wouldn't be here. I don't know if you saw. There's this massive outage on all Windows platforms right now across the country. There's airports are all backed up, all sorts of stuff. And apparently it has to do with CrowdStrike, the company or whatever. Yeah. I haven't read too much about it because I was.
The globalists are taking over. I'm going to go the conspiracy route.
There you go. Globalists taking over, as Johnny Mac said. Hopefully all of our viewers can get by the globalists.
Get the tinfoil hat on.
Can get by him and watch us today. So we appreciate you all being here this morning. Johnny Mac, let's get into the safeties, man. How do you view the safety position as we are just 4 days out from them reporting for training camp? Safeties, take it away, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm insane because everybody is more excited about the linebacker position than me. And I start to think, well, what am I missing? And Zach being the latest yesterday, he seems fine with the linebacker position.
Yeah, that was
and there's a lot of people like Zach, and I have tremendous respect for his football knowledge. So it made me rethink it, and I still think Zach's wrong, but it made me rethink it. I said, all right,
a little bit of exercise where you question yourself is a good, healthy thing.
Yeah, exactly. So when people like Zach, who I respect, say something, I pause and I say, what am I missing? And I look at back and I think it already, even to somebody with that type of thing, those pedigrees are tough to give up on, man. That's bottom line what it comes down to.
Yeah, for sure.
But as safety, I feel like I'm crazy because I got no problem with the Eagles safety position. I think they're pretty good. Now there's some concerns over durability with CJ Gardner-Johnson, but if he's on the field, he's proven he's a playmaker. And he did it here, and everybody knows how well he played here. And you saw the difference without him. Not that it was only him, because it was also, Abante getting hurt. There were a bunch of things that messed up the secondary. Marcus Epps, even. Nobody talks about Marcus. But Marcus was a steadying presence that they didn't want to pay. And
I
then
kind of
you
wish we brought Marcus back. I liked the way Marcus Epps played the game. He was a
Yeah,
physical
I like
player.
Marcus. I
Yeah.
like Marcus as well, but I think Reed Blankenship has already surpassed him as a player. So that's
Okay.
one aspect that, they probably got it right, to be honest.
Yeah,
But
no, they did. I more personally like the player, but yeah, you're right. I mean, they've patched it pretty good.
yeah, now obviously you couldn't create the playmaking aspect of what CJ, and also the energy that he brings to the defense on the field. A bit of a trash talker, gets people excited. Um, so he can play. It's very similar to Avonte Maddox. He can play. The question is he going to be on the field? And that's legitimate. He missed most of last season in Detroit, tore his pec. I'm torn on the injury prone label, because to me, injury prone is like, could you have played? It's like Lane Johnson will fight through a torn adductor muscle in his
Right.
groin. A lot of guys aren't going to do that. Can you play versus, I always bring up Nate Gary because everybody disliked him as a player, but he played a whole season with a sports hernia. And that's why Jim Schwartz and Ken Plagiol loved him, and nobody knew it. And they're like, why do these guys keep throwing it? Because they had nothing else and they needed him out there, and they had tremendous respect for him that he would go out there and play through that. Like, if you tear your pec, you tear your pec. You can't play. If you tear your ACL, like Sidney Brown, you tear your ACL. You can't play with a torn ACL. Maybe you can play a play like Carson Wentz, but that's about it. Couple plays people have done, but you get my point. There are significant injuries, and sometimes it's just bad luck. Versus, and I'll use Avonte again. I think one of the problems with Avonte, he's such a physical guy, and he's so undersized, like he's throwing his body in there, and I think that makes him more susceptible to getting injured. With CJ, I think it's been bad luck. Lacerated kidney. I mean, that's a tough injury.
Yeah, you're right. It's like one of those. It's also like a weird injury. It's not like a.
Yeah, Zach had it. Zach Ertz, which is, and he was back in like 2 games, Zach. But I digress. It's a weird injury, and obviously they're different. Where is it? How many broken ribs do you have? Generally, have broken ribs when you get because you got to break the ribs.
There's varying degrees, right?
Yeah, to get to the kidney. So to me, that's bad luck, and torn pec is torn pec. It's like that's just bad luck. So maybe that luck turns, but I get why people question his durability. When he's out there, though, he makes plays. Heck, he came back to Detroit and got an interception at the end of the season in the playoffs. When the guy's out on the field, he makes plays, and
yeah, he absolutely does.
You can't. It's like having a home run hitter in baseball. Like, CJ is gonna take some chances, but I always say, do you want the 5-tool player, or do you want Ryan Howard hitting 47 home runs in the middle of your lineup? Well, you probably want the big guy.
Yeah. Well, I actually think CJ does a pretty good job. I don't think he gets. I mean, for the type of production he's had and the games played in the recent years, I don't think he's been burnt too many times, meaning he overcommitted to try and make the play and he struck out, to go with your analogy of the home run hitter. Like Trayvon Diggs is a guy.
Oh, Trayvon, yeah, that's who I was going to.
You see him strike out often. You don't see that as much with.
Well, he's a corner. He's a corner.
Yeah, so it's different.
So it's more for corners. If you take a chance and get beat, it's more obvious. Shall we say? So when CJ, and he's played in the slot, of course, before he got here, and he played here a little bit when they needed him, and he's another versatile guy, can move all around. But I mean, his PFF grades weren't great here from what you would consider in 2022 because he does take chances. So PFF grades are about play-to-play consistency, play-to-play consistency. So he's not the most consistent player in the world, but you saw the impact of his playmaking skills. That's why I can compare him to the home run hitter. And then I think the meshing of him with Reed Blankenship is good because Reed is more of that steady presence. Like he had a good PFF grade. That's why. Because he's steady from play to play to play. There's also some durability issues with Reed, but I think it's a good compliment. I really do. CJ and Reed Blankenship. And then Sidney Brown. Again, whether he's here for week 1 or not, and the Eagles are probably going to be cautious. He's going to be back early in the season.
I think what, like week 4 to week 6, somewhere in that range?
I would say even before that. I think now the rule changes might egg you on it. Like it depends how many guys are injured. Like when Howie's trying to get down to 53 and who he wants to risk losing on waivers. Because you have those 2 extra spots, they changed the rules this year. It used to be if you didn't make the initial 53, you were done for the season. That is no longer the case. You can bring 2 guys back who are not on the initial 53 from injured reserve. So that might change the thinking and say, can we get through 4 games? Because you got to miss 4 games if you're on IR. Can we get through 4 games without Sidney? Then they might play it cautiously there.
Right.
But if they want to get him on the field before week 5, you got to put him on the initial 53. So do you want to carry him for, say, 2 weeks if he's ready for week 3? So that's what they'll be weighing. But from his perspective, he thinks he'll still be ready for week 1. I don't think the Eagles will let him do that. I think they'll hold him back and play it cautious. But either way, he's going to be back early in the season, and he's a big time prospect, and the Eagles love him. And I'm not concerned about him regaining the explosiveness because I can already see it, and he's not even cleared. I mean, he's just a crazy athlete. So the issues with Sidney Brown as a young player, very raw. You saw him last year, plays 100 miles an hour, sometimes overruns plays, got to get more discipline, got to get more focus, that kind of thing. And that'll come with experience. But I think that's a nice prospect to have in your back pocket that if something goes wrong with CJ or Reed, Sidney Brown's going to be ready to go relatively early in the season. And then it comes down to how he wants to handle it. Do you really need a force safety when you think Avonte Maddox can play safety? And you know Avonte can play safety at a certain level. And you think Cooper DeJean can play it. That's more of a projection. So do you want to keep that extra young corner? Maybe Josh Jobe for special teams, maybe Eli Ricks because they don't want to lose him. Or do you want to keep Tristan McCullum or Mekhi Gardner as that force safety? That's an interesting discussion as well. I would lean towards them keeping the extra corner because they could probably get, as they did last year, the reason Mekhi Gardner made this football team last year. They cut him because they knew they could get him through waivers, and they were concerned they couldn't get Eli Ricks through waivers because he made the big splash play on television. And remember, other teams don't get to see practices, every practice. So when you see somebody like Mekhi Gardner being good in practice, well, nobody knows that outside of Philadelphia. They might read the reports, and teams do have people that do that and try to copy things. But when you see something visually, in Eli Ricks, the pick 6 in Baltimore, granted it was against a 4-team quarterback, granted it was a telegraph pass, but it showed you instincts and athleticism and everything people knew when he was a 5-star recruit going to LSU before he even got to Alabama. And the Eagles kind of fell in love with that cover upside that he has. That I want to still keep him. And so a lot of that will depend on who they think they can get through waivers. But the three guys that are going to be here are CJ, Reed, and Sydney, obviously.
Let's go to our super chat here about the Mekhi Garner from James Carver. James, thanks for checking in, man. Thanks everybody for being here this morning. Appreciate all you guys. Make sure you hit the like for us on Birds 365. James Carver says, I'm really looking forward to seeing Mekhi Garner playing his natural safety position this camp. He's supposedly locked in at safety permanently now. Johnny Mac just gave you some intel on Mekhi Garner. We'll see how it works out for Mekhi coming into camp here.
Yeah, I mean, he like I said, he deserved to make the team last year, but it's one of those things where they thought they would lose Eli, and I had that discussion with Jody a lot last year, and my gut was they would have gotten both through waivers, but they didn't want to risk it, and they went the way they went. I don't know. I don't know if he's a natural corner, a natural safety. He's a cornerback moving to safety. But I mean, there was that projection because he's such a big guy, 6'2", 210, somewhere in that range. He's not the fastest guy in the world. So a lot of people projected the move to safety at the NFL level. And I think, the Eagles are moving him there. I don't think he's moving back. Part of the reason why is because of the numbers game. They have so many corners, and they need an extra safety. And that's why James Bradbury, I guess we should make a passing notice of James Bradbury as well. If he's practicing, we'll see. But Nick indicated it's going to be at safety. Part of the reason for that and Mekhi is that they have so many stinking corners. And, in the case of Mekhi, to me, it's more relevant because he's got a chance to make the team. And I think ultimately that James is going to be moved. But yeah, he's in a better position at least to try to make the team at safety than corner.
Yeah, so we'll see how it shakes out. A lot of different ways the Eagles can go here, especially with all those, as you mentioned, all the cornerback, stuff that they have going on. So it'll be interesting to see. Johnny Mac, who is your projection for who makes this team, and what they end up doing? I know you kind of laid it out, but just if you had to lean one way or the other, what do you think they would do here, to balance the practice squad and who to bring back and how to get them through waivers and the IR? I mean, it's a complicated part of the roster.
Yeah, it is more complicated, which I don't think is good for fans. And B, there's less strategy, which I don't think is good for Howie Roseman and good general managers, because it allows the dummies to, keep everybody basically. So I don't like the rule changes. I think it takes some strategy out of it from both of those ends. And not only does it take strategy out of it, it makes it more complicated for the fans. So I don't like it from both ends, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, every year we have this discussion. Every year I say the same thing. The waiver wire is one of the most overrated things in the history of the NFL. There's 40, 50 guys might get claimed on that first waiver claim when they cut to 53. Do the math. It's less than 2 per team. Most of the time, and that's why I said when that was the big debate in the NovaCare complex. Well, we might lose Eli Ricks. We can probably get Mekhi Garner through waivers. That was like the 53rd spot. Well, Mario Goodrich was involved as well, who unfortunately for him is probably out of the equation. But, those discussions are not as important this time of year. And we'll never know. I mean, somebody might have claimed Eli if they put him on waivers. My hunch is he would have gotten through. and they would have gotten Ricks and Garner anyway, but that can never be proven. And similar thing this year. So if you look at the back end of the roster, is Tyler Hall going to make this team? I don't know. He's a veteran, though. You can cut him and bring him back to the practice squad. I believe he's vested. Andre Sam, Tristan McCullum, Mekhi Gardner, Mario Goodrich is a guy I just mentioned. Those are all potentially practice squad guys because I do think they want to keep as many corners as possible.
Yeah, so we'll see what they end up doing. Good stuff, Johnny Mac. Good breakdown, man. That's all of our position groups on the offense and defensive side of the ball that we have now run through. Started on offense last week, got through each and every one. Some very good stuff by you. I encourage everybody to go and read those reports at si.com/NFL/Eagles. John does fantastic work over there. And if you want to be ready for camp like we are, and like all of our listeners are from listening to us every day, go and read Johnny Mac's
work. You can listen to the audio version too on the YouTube channel. They all get posted.
Absolutely. They're all up here on our YouTube channel, as Johnny Mac mentioned. So good stuff there. Johnny Mac will hit our first commercial timeout. We'll come back. I got some questions for you as we approach camp. A little bit more zoomed out, a little bit more overall where Johnny Mac's thoughts are as we enter training camp. So we'll do some of that. Look at this, Johnny Mac, our buddy Eduardo Reza. Damn, am I ready for week 1? I will be there in Sao Paulo for that game, crossing that off my bucket list, visiting Brazil and seeing the Jesus statue at Rio. Tremendous stuff, Eduardo. I hope you have a great time down there in Brazil. We will get you ready for it, man, leading right up to that game. So pretty good. Thanks, everybody, for being here this morning. All of our great viewers are here. We appreciate you making the time and spending some time with us this morning. Make sure you drop a like. Stay tuned. Birds 365 will be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Friday edition of Birds 365, July 19th. It's incredible how quick this summer is moving, everybody. I mean, we're 10 days out, 11 days out from August. It's crazy how quick everything is going. 4 days out, obviously, from the Philadelphia Eagles reporting to training camp. Johnny Mack, as we do that, as we prepare for next week, first off, lay it out for us in terms of the schedule, what the people can expect, how they're going to be following along. I know they're reporting on Tuesday, but they're not technically on the field right until Wednesday. You don't have any NovaCare duties until Wednesday. So give us the timeline just on what the people can expect on, when they're going to be learning more information and such.
9:30 Wednesday morning. It all kicks off with Nick Sirianni's first press conference of training camp, and 10 o'clock they're on the field. So that's when you'll start getting trickling in information, and obviously we'll be reporting everything here. We're going to do some night shows, I believe, from that perspective, when the Eagles are practicing early in the morning. So that might be a little bit of an upheaval during training camp for the listeners. But, if you look at it from the past perspective, we would do the show in the morning. I would run down there. I'd come back and I'd do a football 24/7 at night. So we might reverse that, turn that, and do a 180 on days the Eagles are practicing. But yeah, that's when it all starts. And, you'll be seeing all the pictures and tweets and video for 10 minutes. We still aren't allowed the video whole practices. But the good thing about training camp practices is they are mandated that they must be open to reporters for the full allotment. So we get to see the whole thing, even though we can't video and picture it all. We get to watch it all. So, yeah, we'll have all the information. Unfortunately, the Eagles are not one of the teams that have very many open practices. August 1st, which is a Thursday, I believe, is the one open practice for fans at Lincoln Financial Field. And, Eagles at Ravens, I believe, Friday, August 9th, first preseason game. Making the trek down to Baltimore, which is miserable, by the way, because of the bottleneck on 95, right around Delaware, right around Martin Frank territory.
Martin Frank, speaking of, he wrote a good piece on the 30,000-foot view of Nick Sirianni. I thought that was good stuff from Martin Frank. John, let me hit the super chat. It'll circle us right back to the safety position, which we just talked about, but it's a good question, so I want to get to it here. James Carver again drops us $5. Thank you, James. Appreciate it, brother. As always, one of our best supporters here on Birds 365. J-Mac, do you see all the guys you covered capable of playing both post and box safety positions? Vic likes to prioritize coverage, and several are more box-style safeties. Johnny Mac, what's your response to James Carver there?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about that for years, really, since Jonathan got here. I mean, Jonathan Gannon, because the Fangio scheme wants more of a coverage safety than a box safety. And Jody and I would have that debate. We were both big fans of Kyle Hamilton, and I was always bringing up, well, if you draft Kyle Hamilton here, you might not be getting the Kyle Hamilton you see in Baltimore. Now, he might be good enough that it would have worked anyway, because he can do so many things. But yeah, we talked about it a little bit with Sidney Brown, because he's more of a box safety, but that was one of those things in college, at least, kind of a player who was almost a star type player where they'd move him around, and he was the best player on defense. So, and the Eagles made sure to project him in the coverage aspect, and make sure to look at him at the Senior Bowl in that aspect of it. And they thought he had the projection to do it down the road. So the answer is no. Vic doesn't use a lot of box safeties. if that's what you're asking, and he's more concerned about coverage aspect when it comes to safety. Like I said, his whole philosophy is basically +1 on defense being in coverage, that +1 player being in coverage instead of pass rushing. So the whole philosophy is based on that. And that's why you see so many players on this roster that have cornerback safety versatility, because, or vice versa in the case of CJ, because so many of them started out in their careers, whether it be college or the pros, as cornerbacks and were moved to safeties because they're looking for coverage people. Coverage, coverage, coverage. And, you know, I get the people who would rather see more of, you know, to me, it's an indictment of the scheme when you wouldn't be utilizing a Kyle Hamilton like Kyle Hamilton. Like, if you get a player like that, you should utilize him as best as possible. I think more about the player than the scheme. Coaches talk a good game with that, but generally, a lot of them are slaves to their scheme. I think Vic is very good within his scheme, but it's his scheme, and I don't think the scheme is changing.
Yeah, so we'll see how it all plays out. Johnny Mac laid out the schedule for us, what it's going to look like next week. He did bring up, you know, we might move around Birds 365. So just stay tuned, everybody. Our commitment to you is 2 hours on Birds 365 a day. It might not come 8 to 10 every day, depending on Johnny Mac getting down there and stuff. But we will get it to you guys no matter what. That's our promise to you. So stay tuned on that. Monday and Tuesday, they'll look pretty good. So John doesn't have to go down there for Monday or Tuesday. So we will be live 8 to 10 a.m. on
Monday, Tuesday, Friday. We will be live 8 to 10.
Okay. So, you know, those other 2 days of Wednesday and Thursday, we'll update you guys early in the week next week on exact scheduling and what that will look like next week. We'll do something in the morning too. You know, it might be something shorter, but I do want to be live at 8 just because, you know, everybody's so used to us getting up there at 8 a.m. So I don't want to, you know, make our viewers think we disappeared on them when the season rolled around. Johnny Mac, we didn't do all this all off season to disappear when the show starts. So we will do that next week. Johnny Mac, I want to ask you, we've talked to everybody, you know, we talked to all of our guests the last couple of weeks about what they're watching as we go into camp. I know your sights are set on Kellen and Jalen and that whole thing, but if you leave that out of it for a second, what are the big storylines as you go into camp? Is it position battles? Is it, you know, more coaching related? What are the things Johnny Mac is focused on as you gear up to head down to NovaCare next week?
Well, I think, you know, the coaching part of it, we talked about a little bit at the start of the show. I don't love the setup for Nick Sirianni and how to navigate this. And obviously the Jalen Hurts, Kellen Moore stuff you mentioned, it's all intertwined. So from the perspective of the players, though, on the field, yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of competition, but I think, you know, the ones that are there are pretty interesting, starting with Tyler Steen on the offense. Is he going to lock down that right guard job? Kind of what I talked about. Maybe you should already have that answer. Maybe they should have bit the bullet because you knew there was limitations with Sua Opeta. And if Tyler Steen was starting the 5 games or whatever that Sua started, maybe you have a better indication of what he is as a potential right guard moving forward. But now there's a lot of uncertainty. What I do like about that positional battle is the Eagles have a lot of contingencies, whether it's moving Mekhi Becton inside or whether it's giving it to Matt Hennessy and he proves he can be healthy, or even Max Sharping, who's got 38 NFL starts on his resume. I think they at least have guys they could fall back who are probably not going to give you spectacular play, but at least they'll give you competent play. And then wide receiver 3, which I'm not sure how important it is, but you got to talk about it because the first 2 are so good, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. There's not going to be a lot of traffic if those guys are out on the field. The only way it becomes important is if one of those guys goes down. And look, season-ending injury, you can't replace players like that. So that part is should be baked into people. But if you do have to replace him for a week or two because of a tweak, a soft tissue tweak or an ankle sprain or something like that, it would be nice to have a little bit more in the cannon, so to speak. And, you saw Aaron Schatz's reaction to Paris Campbell. It's like, because people look at the pedigree and say, oh, maybe Paris Campbell. Well, I mean, we got 5 years now. I mean, sample size is pretty big. I think, if anything, the Eagles got worse from a depth standpoint at wide receiver than they were last year, and they weren't very good last year. So I don't like the way things are shaping up at that position, unless Johnny Wilson catches lightning or Anais Smith catches lightning. And again, if you're counting on day 3 picks, that's probably not a good idea. And that goes everywhere. Not that it can't happen. People always bring up Jason Kelsey here. And even if you want to go more recent, Puka Nacua hit the ground running with the Rams. Your odds aren't good, though. Your odds are not good. And that's it for the offense. Everything else is pretty much concrete, which is a good thing. Defensively, there's battles all over the place. And we talked about a lot of that uncertainty. The most interesting one is going to be cornerback opposite Darius Slay. And, I think it's going to be Quinyon Mitchell. I think Zach agreed with me yesterday. I mean, that's where they want to go, so why not get there? But again, Howie Roseman has a different frame that he's looking through than Nick Sirianni and Vic Fangio, because they're trying to beat Jordan Love in week 1. That's it. And then they'll get to week 2. And if they think Isaiah Rodgers is the best way to go, or even if James Bradbury's still here and they think James Bradbury's the best way to go, you got to win. And by trickle down coaching, Vic's got to win. Because people say, well, Vic will be here if Nick's not here.
Nah, I don't think so.
You hire a new coach, now the Eagles they certainly do it with Jeff Stoutland. They'll say, look, dude, whomever they want to hire, they'll say, Stout's going to be here. And if you can't accept that, Cliff Kingsbury, you're not coming.
That's a little different than a full defensive coordinator, though.
Yeah. But they could technically do that with Vic. And Vic's got such a reputation, it's hard to imagine a lot of coaches not wanting him,
Yeah, but I mean, look, if depending on who you hire, if they come in and they want,
it's not 100% is what I'm saying.
They want their staff.
I think a lot of people,
I mean, an offensive line coach is a different than a defensive coordinator. I mean, you're working with the defensive coordinator probably more so than you're working with the offensive line coach, hand in hand.
Yeah, I and that's all I'm trying to point out is I think a lot of people say, well, you can keep Vic. Not necessarily is all I'm saying. So the only way to guarantee him being back is to win football games. Same as Nick Sirianni. Because if Nick is not here, everybody's in peril, with the exception of Jeff Stoutland when it comes to the coaching staff.
Yeah, they hired Kellen Moore. They didn't want to go Cliff Kingsbury because they weren't moving on from Jeff Stoutland. So
I don't know. By the way, they were not comfortable with some of the changes Cliff wanted to make, and that I want to make this very clear because I reported this, and you get pushback from the Eagles, but they interviewed Cliff first. They were very interested in Cliff Kingsbury. That doesn't mean they were always going to interview Kellen Moore. It doesn't mean they were going to choose Cliff Kingsbury over Kellen Moore. But it does. I mean, if you're being real, it does when you interview somebody first. It might be just logistics, but it typically indicates you have some significant interest. And it basically dried up when, during Clip's interview, when he wanted to make more changes than they were comfortable with. That's not to say they were going to hire him if, and it had, because remember, it's not only Stout. That was one of the pleasant surprises for me in the offseason, because Kellen Moore came in with nothing. He was given Doug Nussmeier, and that's basically it. Kyle Valero as well, who's a lower level coach. That's it. Everybody else, Stout, Jamal Singleton, Aaron Moorhead, Jason Michael, even if you go lower down the list, TJ Paganetti, the Tyler Scutters, they've all been here with Nick. They're all loyal to Nick. So that was positive from Nick Sirianni's perspective. And Cliff wanted to make many more changes than that. I just kind of was joking around when I said Stout, because Cliff Kingsbury's a dummy if he doesn't want Stout. And good. You wouldn't have hired him anyway.
Johnny Mac, expectations on how quickly you learn things at a camp like this. Like, how quickly do you think, and more so you, not me, or not the listening audience. You mentioned you're going to be down there. You're going to be able to watch every practice. You won't be able to video every practice, but you'll be able to watch every practice. How quick do you think you'll pick up, the right guard battle? How quickly will we know whether it's Tyler Steen or the field? How quickly will we know, who's going to be the wide receiver 3? How quickly will you learn some of these things, or even just a more broader question, how quickly will you know whether the offense is going to, find any sort of rhythm at all? What's your expectation as you go down
there? Second half of camp, I would say. But you remember, now there's so many rules that legislated. You have the ramp up period where you can't put on pads for a while. They're still installing things. Nick would take, I believe it was 8 practices to completely install his offense. So I think it's going to be similar with Kellen Moore, maybe even a little bit more because it's new. So, you have installation, and then from the standpoint of the Eagles, as I've said, they're a very difficult team to judge in practice because of their quarterback, because plays get blown dead in practice. And you see Jalen Hurts get frustrated every year and spike the ball. And he's like, oh, dude, why are you blowing this play dead? And obviously they're trying to protect the players. So it'll take a while. As far as positional battles, that's a little bit more easier to discern. Ultimately, Tyler Steen, I think if you go back a couple years, I don't think you're going to see an Andre Dillard, Jordan Mailata circumstance where they were literally day 1, it was Dillard. Day 2, it was Mailata. Day 3, it was Dillard. Day 4, it was Mailata. All the way through most of camp until Andre got hurt, and then Jordan just seized the job. I don't think you're going to see that. I think it's going to be Tyler Steen getting all the first-team reps. And so if it's like day 4, day 5, and all of a sudden Matt Hennessy's getting first-team reps.
Yeah, right. You'll know if he was supplanted pretty quick.
Yeah. Or even if they want to, because I don't think they would just bench him from first-team reps. I think it would be more of, all right, we're going to mix some other people in and see what we have. So, and then, wide receiver 3, as I said, that'll be interesting. Cornerback, how they handle that rotation, because that will probably be more of a dimming out of reps.
You mean splitting up reps, right? Yeah.
Yeah. where you're going to see first team reps for Rodgers. You might see first team reps for Ringo even, and you are going to see first team reps for Mitchell.
That's probably the most exciting camp battle, I guess you could say, that I'm excited to hear how it plays out and see the footage coming from it and all that stuff. Just because, right guard matters, obviously, but I'm just excited to see what of the young corners steps up, which one earns the spot, which one, they're going to roll with. That's probably the most exciting position battle for me as we enter camp.
Yeah, that'll probably be the headliner, because I think it's all good players with upsides too. I think that helps. Whereas
it's not like linebacker you're picking between
evidently, but I don't know. Maybe I'm woefully wrong on Devin White. Hopefully, for Eagles fans' sake, I'm woefully wrong on Devin White, because Vic Fangio believes in him, I guess. That's a good person to have in your corner.
John, we're going to have to hold you accountable on this show.
Hey,
man.
Feel free. I'm saying, hold me accountable.
Turns out,
but because when you say Vic Fangio's wrong, you should be held accountable. I'm saying right in the if that's the belief, and by the way, I don't believe Vic is concrete. I still think Nakobe Dean's going to be the guy. I just brought that up because I asked Zach that question. He said Devin White's going to be on the field. By the way, how is that a good thing? If Devin White's the only linebacker on the field, so that means dime packages, the only linebacker on the field, he's playing every defensive snap. How is that a good thing to anybody in Eagles Nation? How is that a freaking good thing? How do you spin that as a good thing other than pedigree?
I don't know if you can. I mean, unless he plays well.
A lot of people are doing it.
Look,
like,
I mean,
I
think where the other side of it is, though.
If you watch 3 games in the playoffs, I get it. If you watch the other 5 seasons and take those 3 games out, I don't get it. So you got small sample size versus large sample size. Which one are you going to bet on?
Yeah,
Aaron Schatz will tell you what to bet on.
Look, I know pedigree is not everything, and pedigree scouting, it can be a lost cause in some moments. But isn't there some part of it that does matter? I mean, especially when you're talking about the linebacker position for the Philadelphia Eagles, it hasn't been the greatest position. Haven't had players that have been that good. He was a player that had inherent talent to be drafted where he was drafted. I'm not saying he's going to be productive. I'm not saying he's going to be that great, but from an excitement level, I'm not saying he's going to unlock it. I'm not saying he's going to turn the career around, but you put him with Vic Fangio. This is a guy that we haven't had in Philly for a while in terms of he does possess raw talent. Doesn't mean he's going to be a great player. Doesn't mean he's going to put it out on the field. But he does have that raw talent. No, I mean, he got drafted 5th overall as a linebacker.
Does everyone love Mike McMullen here? I mean, there's nobody questions his athleticism, or they shouldn't. He ran a 4.42 coming out at 240 pounds, which he looked heavier then, by the way. So he's got good size. He's got good explosion. He's got every physical trait you could need. But I mean, it's not track and field. It's not American Gladiators.
I'm just saying, I hope that he has something inside. I mean, I think he does. Whether he unlocks it or not is a different question. But, he has more upside, potentially. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate.
This is his 6th NFL season. This is his 6th NFL season. And by the way, for all those who default to pedigree, and there are a lot of them, obviously, why don't you default to contract? I mean, this is a guy who was hell bent on proving he was a Roquan Smith level player last year to get that kind of contract. And he signed a 1-year deal. Forget what was reported, with $3.5 million guaranteed. Now, but with all due respect, sometimes if you go into Walmart today, they got some nice little bargains in the clearance aisle. But if you want something is going to be, you're going to be happy with, you got to pay for it.
Yeah. A quality item.
They went to the Walmart clearance aisle and said, "Oh, I remember this. I'm going to pick this up because it's got the yellow tag on it." 1 year, $3.5 million. And this, and I love you, Zach, and I hope you're listening. This was described as investment in the position. Well, nowhere else. There's 31 other cities in the NFL where that is described as an investment in Philadelphia. And that's why I say this is the investment. This is the high level. Now, there are incentives that he could get up to 7.5, and that's what you saw reported. And if he plays well, the Eagles will gladly hand over that $7.5 million. That's still cheap, by the way.
I was a little surprised that Berman said that about the contract. So, he's a smart guy, and he kind of went with it.
But it blinded by pedigree.
Yeah, but he specifically went to the contract too, that they gave him the big contract. I'm like, they didn't really give him a big contract.
For them, it's big, I guess.
$3.5 million.
I mean, it's bigger than Paul Warlow and Corey Nelson and Eric Wilson and the direct that Zach has seen over the years. He brought up Nigel Bradham, right in the same range.
I have a good story about Nigel Bradham.
Although Nigel, they gave 2 years, I believe. So that was different. That's a big thing for them. It's in the Kaiser White range. And they didn't want to. And by the way, Kaiser was competent. It wasn't great, but he was competent in the Super Bowl year. And, he left because he got 2 years and they wouldn't give him 2 years. I still believe the Eagles will be better than people think at linebacker. Well, it's kind of I don't know how to phrase this because some people think they're good. But for those who are more in my camp and think it's a bad position, I think it'll be better than it looks like on paper, but it'll be because of Nakobe, not Devin White. That's where Zach and I differ. Like Devin White, Nakobe's got to be the green dot. Nakobe's got to be the guy that's on the field if he's healthy. That's the biggest thing with Nakobe Dean. If he's healthy. Now, I think from that standpoint, I understand where Zach is coming from in the aspect of if you just think about it, but I went through this in Minnesota, and I'll explain that in a second. The assumption that the athletic guy is going to be better in coverage than the other guy. I've been through it too many times. I always say Jack Del Rio was one of the smartest nickel linebackers I ever saw in a different era. Just had a tremendous feel for being in the right spot in zones. And at the time, the Vikings were a cover 2 team, Tony Dungy, that group, Monty Kiffin, all those guys. And he was great at it. And further down the road, as he kind of aged out, they drafted a guy, and James Carver, our buddy, might know the name because he's an Auburn guy, Dontarius Thomas. Now, Dontarius Thomas was a freak athlete. I mean, a freak athlete at 250 pounds, could run like the wind. Just had everything from an athletic standpoint that would think you say this guy's going to be a good player. And the Vikings really thought he was going to be a great coverage linebacker because of his athleticism. And he was also a smart guy. He tremendous scores from the standpoint of, so they thought this, well, he's really smart. He's really athletic. He's going to understand. He was terrible. He just didn't have a feel for it. He just didn't have a feel for coverage. He didn't have instincts. That's that word with linebackers. He just didn't. But people get enamored with the athleticism. Nakobe has the instincts. That's why I'm higher on Nakobe. I know people haven't seen it, but he's a very instinctual player.
Yeah, that matters too at linebacker, big time.
And we're going to have a linebacker. I'll be interested to see what G Cobb says. But I have a feeling that G's going to be enamored. And I'm not going to talk for him, but I'm just giving
I'm not sure if he is.
He's going to be enamored of Devin White, because everybody who played the game is enamored with Devin White because he's a phenomenal freaking athlete. And you have never heard me say he wasn't. But his instincts aren't there.
John, we're talking about linebacker. This guy's been coming up. I'm gonna bring Eduardo's question up. You're either gonna push Eduardo and make Eduardo realize really quickly that this will never happen here in Philadelphia, or you'll give him a sliver of hope. Hey, Johnny Mac, what are the chances Howie goes after JOK from the Browns? Apparently, they're having some contract troubles, Johnny Mac. And the folks are now calling for Howie to make the move and go and pick up Jeremiah.
Are you kidding me? First of all, the Browns aren't letting him go anywhere. I don't care what. Yeah, that's like the Vikings having contract squabbles with Justin Jefferson. And, he showed up for a paternity suit in Jersey in the offseason. Oh, the Jets are going to trade for Jets. No, they're not. The Browns aren't letting him go. And even if they did, the Eagles certainly aren't paying him. So, I mean, he's good.
He's talking about big money.
Yeah, he's really good. You talk about an athlete who's got instincts. There you go. And there's a guy who should have been a first-round pick. He wasn't because
John, you loved him coming out of the draft.
Yeah. Well, he had some kind of heart thing that people were concerned about. Yeah, that's always – the medical standpoint had him falling a little bit, but he has proven that he should have been a first-round pick. He is a great player, naturally instinctive, great athlete, coverage player. Looks like he's 100 years old, even though he's young. But, yeah, he was here with the Browns. Yeah, he's really impressed. Jim Schwartz isn't letting him go anywhere. He might resign if they lose him. No, the Eagles, like I said, the Eagles aren't investing in that type of player. Period. They've proven it,
especially at that dollar amount. They wouldn't even invest $7 million on TJ Edwards, which they probably could have finagled and paid him most of it up front and taken.
TJ's the guy they should have kept.
Yeah, I think Howie knows that too. I think he's the one that got away from Howie Roseman. To be honest,
I don't think he knows it at all. I don't.
You don't know it. The linebackers have been putrid. The Chicago linebackers are tremendous.
Look, for the most part, I think Howie's right. That's the ironic part. I think the position should be devalued. Just, I think he's taken it too far, as they always say. I wouldn't invest what the Baltimore Ravens invested in Roquan Smith, who's. I'm not saying Roquan Smith isn't a good player. He's a really good player. I find it ironic that Chicago wouldn't pay him and they went out and paid Tremaine Edmonds, who's not as good, and TJ is actually better, and they paid both of those guys. So they made no sense. But from the most part, when you pay these guys, and Patrick Queen, look, he had one good season. So I don't agree with Pittsburgh's investment there. Not that he's not a good player. In the case of JOK, you know, he's going to cash in big time. And the Eagles aren't in those conversations. And even if I think this is his 4th year, so it's his contract year. So even if it's not overridingly expensive right now, the compensation, and again, Cleveland's not trading him, and they're not moving on from him. It's just a lot of teams have contract squabbles, or whatever you want to call them, and things get done. Look at Brandon Ayuk in San Francisco right now. The same thing was happening with Deebo Samuel years ago. Oh, he wants to go back to Carolina. Oh, he doesn't want to play in San Francisco. And all of a sudden they get a deal done. Part of the process, and that's another thing where the Eagles are ahead of the game. Eagles fans don't have to deal with that kind of stuff. This kind of stuff is normal around the rest of the league. It'll get done. And even if it didn't, in the worst case scenario, and they were trying to trade him, they'd want way too much than the Eagles would be willing to give up.
Yeah, so we'll see how it all plays out, John. Any other thing on your mind as we wrap up? I know the linebacker is obviously a contested one, and we talked about the corners a little bit, but anything else that's a sleeper maybe that you're going to be watching when you go down there next week?
I want to see the sub packages on defense. I think that was the most interesting part of the spring work, was that, at times Quinyon Mitchell was playing in the big nickel or as a dime linebacker, whatever you want to call it. How much is Vic going to use that? How many times is there only going to be one linebacker on the field? And who's that linebacker going to be? Kobe's interesting to me because clearly, like last year, they came into the season and he was the guy. Now he's got to prove himself. Do they give him an opportunity to prove himself, or have they truly pulled the plug on him? That's possible. I think he's going to be one of the more interesting stories. And Zach was way high on Oren Burks too, which shocked me. Did anybody watch the Super Bowl when Oren Burks had to come in?
Yeah, it wasn't good.
Yeah, he's a great special teams player. And I've said, if he's your third game day linebacker, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, that game completely changed when he was forced onto the field. Now, Drake Greenlaw is very good, but I think he was targeted 9 times. I think they were 9 for 9 when targeting him in coverage. And they went right after him. It wasn't good. And that's why I'm not saying Ben Van Sumeren is going to make the team. I'm just saying I'm intrigued by him because of his athleticism. And he showed when he was thrown into the fires, he showed some instincts, which I was impressed by. Maybe it turns out to be nothing, but I'm saying if he has a decent summer, you got to cut one of those older linebackers and keep him.
Yeah.
From my perspective.
I would agree with that for sure. So we'll see how it all plays out. Johnny Mac, let's get to our commercial break here. We have Gary Cobb coming up next on Birds 365. Very excited to talk to G Cobb. We have him on Cilio's show all the time, but I think it'll be a much different type of interview here, when he's in this format, different questions, different perspective, different outlook on the team. So I'm excited to get G Cobb up. I want to thank everybody for being here this morning. Over 400 plus watching on all of our platforms, over 150 specifically on YouTube. So thank you guys. Whatever platform you're consuming on, we appreciate you for being here, for watching the show and consuming Birds 365. Guys, hit a like for us, hit a like for Johnny Mac, and stay tuned. Gary Cobb coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, on the Birds 365, a Football Friday edition. Last Football Friday before we are officially at training camp, just 4 days away from the Philadelphia Eagles reporting to camp, waiting on our friend Gary Cobb, who will join us in just a couple of minutes here. When he joins, I will bring him up right away. Johnny Mac, I want to go to our friend Ed Krause, who's been writing his camp storylines. He wrote about the linebackers, and we were just talking about him, so let's go there and just finish out what we think and what you think. Linebacker shuffle, who wins which job is the way Ed Krause phrased it. You know, you have Devin White, you have Nakobe Dean, you have Oren Burks, you have Trotter Jr. How will it play out in terms of Mike and Will and where each player plays? You know, let's just assume it's Nakobe and Devin. Is it Nakobe at Mike and Devin at Will?
I think so. But, you know, Zach went the other way. And certainly in the spring, look, it was Devin White. But Nakobe, from my standpoint, Nakobe had, for those who don't know, he had Liz Frank surgery. He was not cleared at the start of OTAs. About the second or third OTA practice, they started mixing him back in, clearly not 100%. And then by minicamp, he seemed to have been cleared. And he got some first team reps, but he didn't get a lot. Most of the first team reps, Devin was the Mike linebacker. Zach Baun was the weak side linebacker. And Nakobe mainly played on the second team with Oren Burks as the Mike linebacker, and mixed in occasionally with the first team, but very rarely. I remember one red zone period he was out there. So I think the door is still open. Bobby King is the new linebackers coach, mentioned that they like the two positions to be interchangeable anyway. But I think, and even the green dot part of it is overrated. I mean, I remember Jim Schwartz when Jordan Hicks got hurt, and we peppered him with questions about, you know, how is Nigel going to take that over? And he got frustrated at one point and said, "Can he listen to what I say? Just relay what I say. It's not that big of a deal." So, but where it is a big deal, there's so many packages, sub packages in the NFL now where there's only one linebacker on the field. If you're that guy, you know, you're more important than the other guy. And it could be either. I think, Devin certainly has a history from the standpoint of durability. No question he's a proven commodity. He's always playing. He's never hurt. He's a bigger guy. He's a more athletic guy. But I just hold out hope that Nakobe Dean can stay healthy. Maybe hope it's not a strategy, as Howie would say. But I think if he's healthy and he's 100%, why wouldn't he be? I think he's your best linebacker. So I think he's the guy you'd want to keep on the field. I think the second part is pedigree. And I should have mentioned that before. Durability. Devin's proven from a durability standpoint. So you don't have to worry about that as much. And he's a bigger guy and a more physical guy. But, I think the first time he overruns a play, people are going to be like, oh, oof, what are we doing here? So we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. We're still waiting on our friend Gary Cobb. We'll see if we can get him in. I did just do some business on the air and shot him another text. So hopefully we will be joined by Gary Cobb coming up in a little bit. As Johnny mentioned, a former Eagle linebacker. So maybe he can give us
and
his
a former
take.
Cowboys linebacker.
And for Gary,
People don't like that part.
Yeah, look, most people play in multiple different
and a former Detroit Lion. The three best teams. He didn't get to San Francisco though.
Yeah, that's a good point, Slager. Maybe Gary is using Microsoft. I'm waiting on Gary to join us now. He's in the green room, but his devices are not connected yet in terms of video and audio. So waiting on that. Hopefully we get JAKIB up in just a second. John, I'm going to switch gears just a second here and go to Kellen Moore. Where are you on Kellen Moore? The more I think about Kellen Moore in this offense, the more I think he's under pressure. Because if the ship's
under pressure,
I know, but I mean, like everybody's talking about Nick Sirianni's on the hot seat and Jalen Hurts has to turn it around. Kellen Moore is coming in his third team in 3 years. This is his most talented offense maybe he'll ever have. And if it doesn't work, it's not going to look good for him because he's going to get fired and be looking for the fourth team in 4 years, which is not a good look.
I don't like the term dream team for Philadelphia for obvious reasons. So I'll call them an all-star team. I mean, people think the Eagles have an all-star team on offense. And for the most part, they do. With a couple question marks that we brought up, right guard, wide receiver 3. Those are rich people problems, so to speak. When you look around the rest of the NFL, I think the biggest luxury, Kellen Moore, certainly when you talk about the best offense he's ever had, I guarantee it's the first offense he never had to worry about his tackles at all. And that's the biggest luxury for Nick Sirianni, for Shane Steichen, for Brian Johnson that Kellen Moore had. They get the game plan and they don't have to worry about their offensive tackles or helping their offensive tackles. That is an incredible luxury that nobody else has, or very few. We'll just say that. So that makes it a lot easier. And then obviously the playmakers are really good, great to really good. Whatever scale you want to go down. But I mean, the expectations are otherworldly. All you have to do is go back to last season. Number 8 wasn't good enough. Number 7 in points per game wasn't good enough. Number 3 in third down offense, number 1 in fourth down offense, number 9 in red zone offense. All of that not good enough. good luck.
Good luck is right. I mean, we'll see how it all works out for the Philadelphia Eagles here. John, I'm ready, man. I'm ready to go. 4 days away from this. We haven't been able to get Gary Cobb up. So anybody in the chat, if you guys have some questions for Johnny Mac, we will take them right now. I would love to talk to you guys. See what the fans.
The globalists have gotten G Cobb.
They might, man. He might be on that Microsoft computer and he's trying to load it up and it's just not working. We saw him check in, but we couldn't see him or hear him. So I don't know what's going on with this computer. Hopefully we can get Gary up. But if not, Johnny Mac and I will take it to the top. Just 30 minutes left to go here on Birds 365. Hey, like I said, if any of you guys have a good comment or a good chat or a good question for John McMullen, I will take it here as we have 30 minutes left to go here on Friday's show. Birds 365. The last
thing
one
about globalists too and the takeover of Microsoft. I'm joking. Please don't ask that question.
Yeah, well, Johnny Mac keeps bringing up the globalists. Johnny Mac, you're like putting the target on your own back right now.
Yeah, but mine's a joke. Others will take it. I should learn. Don't tweak the tinfoil people.
John, let's talk a little bit. Let's go broader. Let's go broader. NFL, NFC. What other storylines have captivated you as we prepare for training camp here? What else are you watching? I know you're obviously more focused on the Philadelphia Eagles, but there are some good things in the NFL that's happening across the NFL right now. What teams are you kind of looking at this year that might be a sleeper team or might make a run this year? A lot of teams got a lot better.
Yeah, I think I got into that with Aaron a little bit from the standpoint of the rest of the league. I thought it was interesting that he was still really high on Baltimore. Like, I think there's been so many changes in Baltimore. I still think they're going to be a good team, a really good team. But and their issue is that they're kind of like the Cowboys of the AFC, right? I mean, they're great in the regular season, and then at some point they fall apart in playoffs, and that's the hurdle that Lamar Jackson's got to overcome because he doesn't have to overcome any other ones. He's been a phenomenal player, 2-time MVP now. But their coaching staff was just decimated, especially defensively. Not only you lose your defensive coordinator to become Seattle's head coach, as I mentioned yesterday, Anthony Weaver was their defensive line coach. He goes and leaves to become the DC in Miami to replace Vic Fangio. Denard Wilson, our old buddy, was their secondary coach, and he leaves for Tennessee to be their DC. I think that's going to be something tougher than maybe people think to replace guys like that. But they're really good. I mean, from a talent perspective, just talent all over the field. I think Kyle Hamilton's one of the best players in the NFL, to be honest. And that's rare to say of a safety, but he's the kind of guy who can move all over, kind of the new age positionalist player type of guy. He can cover. He can play up at the line of scrimmage. He can play glorified linebacker, whatever you want to call it, star position, hero position. He can do everything. But they're really good up front as well. Madubuike is one of the better defensive tackles, underrated. I mentioned Roquan Smith earlier in the show, tremendous linebacker. Their other safety, Marcus Williams, great cover corner. The Eagles really wanted to sign when the Ravens signed.
Yeah, I remember that.
So they're a really good team. But I just don't like all that upheaval on the coaching staff. So what it did to the Eagles.
Yeah.
I mean, it's never a good thing, continuity-wise. So I thought it was interesting that Aaron was so high, still so high on the Ravens. And he I believe, I got to listen back, but I believe he put them ahead of Kansas City. And from a talent perspective, they might be ahead of Kansas City, but I think there's a whole lot of intangibles. So we've talked about intangibles that you can't measure. I think Kansas City has a whole lot of those. On the NFC side, I think it's 2-horse race again. I mean, the Giants and the Commanders. I think the Commanders are still headed in the right direction. And I don't think Josh Harris is a great NBA owner. I'm very honest about that. But he's going to be a hell of a lot better NFL owner than Daniel Snyder at the bare minimum.
Right.
So the bar's
You're only going in the right direction if Jaden Daniels works out. Now, I think he's gonna. I like the player, but I'm just saying if he doesn't work out, they're gonna stay in the abyss land.
Well, yeah. I mean, their backup is Marcus Mariota. I mean, and that's another thing with young court. You saw with Anthony Richardson. You know, sometimes there's durability issues, so they're not in a good position if Jaden Daniels doesn't hit the ground running. I'm talking more long term. I don't expect him to be relevant this year. Although that defense, I will say one thing about the Commanders.
There's JAKIB.
You know, they still have Darren Payne. They still have Jonathan Allen. They brought in Frankie Luvu and Bobby Wagner at linebacker. And Bobby's been playing forever, and he's going to the Hall of Fame. They're going to be better at linebacker than the Eagles. Let's get our linebacker up. Can we get JAKIB up?
JAKIB joining us now on Birds 365. Gary, what's up, man? Welcome to the show. How you doing this morning?
Good. It was adventure trying to get on, you know.
Get knocked out by the global yeah. Maybe you're in that level with Microsoft.
Yeah, that's what it told me. Yeah, I guess they're having some kind of thing going on, you know, that's hitting everything. But I was able to use the wife's
nice. All right, you're working hard. We appreciate it, JAKIB. Good to see you, by the way. So all right, we got a linebacker in the house, so I got to talk to you about linebackers. Where's JAKIB? I say, look, you give Howie Roseman all his flowers, but I think he's taken it too far at linebacker, JAKIB. They don't value the position, and it's changed a lot since your days, and I get part of it, but I just think he's taken it too far. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, the thing is, it's still a very important position because you've got to have athletes at the linebacker position, you know, and look back, you know, of course, they let the young fella leave out of here to Chicago. Come on, that was a mistake. He had. But anyway, it's a very important position. You know, maybe you just have two linebackers on the field. Maybe you just have one a lot of times because, of course, you have, you know, a lot of times you got multiple tight ends on the field or, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 wide receivers on the field. So you got to have less linebackers. But the linebackers you have out there are very important. They got to be able to make one-on-one tackles in the open field. If you're playing zone, sometimes they're going to be playing wide receivers within the zone. So they got to have good quickness. They got to be smart. They got to get everybody lined up where they're supposed to be. Of course, they got to be able to tackle. And they've got to be able to tackle out in the open field. So it's a very important position. I mean, maybe you don't have as many of them on the field, you know, as much as you did in the past, but it's tremendously important. And I'm hoping the guys they brought in here that are going to be able to do a good job. I mean, Devin White, I know teams are going to try to run right at him because he's not that big. He is pretty athletic. But he had a bad year last year, and he's got to improve on that. And, of course, you look at the rest of the players they have there, they don't have guys that have done the job. So you got big question marks over all of them. Some of them, you know, have some talent and everything, but that doesn't mean they're going to be able to do it on the NFL level and do it consistently. And so that's why, really, you look at the linebacker position, and you can't feel great about it. You know, these guys got to prove it. Of course, they got, you know, Zach Bond, they got him in there, and he's never played that position for that many plays. Most of the time he's been lining up outside. So
yeah. But you mentioned those instincts, JAKIB, because that's the thing. Nobody questions Devin White's athleticism, nor should they. I mean, the guy was the number 5 overall pick for a reason.
Yeah.
But we got a large sample size in Tampa Bay. And everybody watched him play for 5 years, said maybe the instincts weren't there. How important is that for the linebacker position?
It is it's really probably the number one factor, because if you're not in the right place, if you can't decipher what they're doing, then you're out of position and you're not going to be making plays. The great linebackers are always around the ball, whether you're running the ball or throwing the ball, they're able to figure out what you're doing and they're always around the ball. And if you got a linebacker that's not around the ball, he's not worth having out there. And, he's got to be able to tackle out in the open field. And if you can't, then they're going to go after him. And you can't hide that linebacker because he's going to be out in open space. And see, that's the thing they've got to be able to do. They got to be able to tackle out in the open field because it's not that hard when you've got the spread offense to be able to get the guy in a one-on-one situation out in the open field. So we're going to see whether he's able to do it anymore or not. I know, he's been a good player in the past, of course, playing on that Super Bowl team.
He was great in the playoffs leading up to the Super Bowl.
That's right. So,
yeah.
We will see. I don't know if I would, I would put your money on it, but I don't know if I would. Put my money.
That's a fair point. G-Cobb, you brought up TJ Edwards. Part of the reason he was great is because he was instinctual. It wasn't because he was the uber athletic guy. Let me talk to you about Nakobe Dean, the Eagles' third-round draft pick from a couple years ago. Where are you on Nakobe Dean, Gary? Are you still in on Nakobe Dean? I'm teetering toward out. He just can't stay on the field. Where are you as we enter this season on Nakobe Dean?
Well, I look at him and in the workouts and things, and I don't see the burst of speed. Now, Devin's got that burst. He can close on guys, close on the ball and everything. I don't see that with Nakobe. I don't see the burst. He is smart, which is very important. I think he's got good instincts, but he's got to stay healthy and get out there and do it, and we haven't seen that. And we haven't really seen him really, with that passion to where I'm finding my way on the field. And he's got to make them put him on the field. You got to come out there with such a passion to where doggone you will not be denied. And I haven't seen that out of him yet. He just he's done all right in practice, but of course in practice, they don't do but so much anymore. It's not where you're seeing them doing a lot of tackling drills and everything. And really at the linebacker position, the number one thing or the top things amongst the top things he's got to be doing is tackling, being a sure tackler, a guy who can tackle people in the open field and make plays. The linebacker has got to be a playmaker, especially the way it is now where you got all this field to cover and they're going to get you in one-on-one situations and you're going to have to tackle wide receivers in one-on-one situations in that space where you're playing zone. Now, I do like the way that Vic I like the way that their defense plays zone. They play man-to-man within the zone, and I do like that. I like some of the things I'm seeing out of the defense.
Yeah, there's a lot of man principles in those Vic Fangio zones. So, sometimes people get confused, and that creates communication issues.
Yep.
So while you went down that route, G. Cobb, I say, so many people around this league have played big schemes, and when they go bad, it's generally because of lack of communication on the back end. Mm-hmm. And the Eagles got a lot of talented young corners. Quinyon Mitchell coming in, Cooper DeJean, Kelly Ringo's in his second year. Isaiah Rogers looked great in the spring, but they're all young players, and that is a very complicated defense from those zone principles.
Yes.
You expect that to bite them early? Should people be prepared for the occasional blown coverage?
I think that it's just something that's inevitable. When you've got young players and you've got a system like they have, which it is, even when I'm sitting there watching it, I have to look at it again to see exactly what they were doing, because he does a great job of these subtle changes in the zone, really to keep a quarterback guessing. So they've got to be communicating, passing receivers from one zone to the other and communicating with their teammates and everything. And in my time playing with young players, they get out there, a lot of times they stop talking, you're in the huddle and the guy looks like he's really, dropping a deuce or something.
Well, they're thinking too much. That's that's part of my problem with, and you've seen it elsewhere.
Yeah.
And you even saw it in the Super Bowl. The Eagles were the #1 pass defense in the NFL, and they blew coverages in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I know.
So you can be that good and still miscommunicate on one play, and bang. Yeah, you got the narrative.
It's tough. And with a lot of things that Fangio, a lot of things he does in his defense, the guys have got to be communicating, and they're going to be changing. I think he changes things on routes and of course formations, and so they've got to be communicating, and guys have got to be on the same page, because really a lot of times, even if you just simplify things to where you just make sure everybody's just playing a standard zone.
Cover 2, baby.
That's
Cover
right.
2 it.
and you just keep, you just at least play and just tackle the guy with the ball and don't give up the big play. A lot of times that's what you end up doing if guys are not communicating well, but you can't afford to be turning guys loose, man. I'm telling you, it really looks bad when you got guys running into the end zone, standing up with nobody near them. That gets a coach fired, and it gets gets a lot of unhappiness in Philadelphia. I tell you that.
Gary, not every day we get to talk to a former NFL player. You had a 10-year career in the NFL.
11.
How do you view
11-year
career in the NFL? How do you view, or what are you watching for coming back into this training camp? And what I mean is, they collapsed last year. They had a historic collapse. As a guy that played in the league, has been in locker rooms, speaks with players still to this day, what's on your mind as you approach training camp in order for them to turn this thing around? What are you most focused on?
Well, I'll tell you one thing I've kind of already seen, really. I saw, during the workouts they had during the offseason, I saw Jalen Hurts talking to A.J. Brown, talking to Devontae Smith. When they come off, well, Devontae wasn't there, but he's talking to the receivers every time he comes to the sideline, which is the way it should be. Last year, Jalen's sitting over there on the side, whatever. Look, you got to be talking about, what did you see? What are they doing against us? It's an ongoing thing, especially if the offense is not moving. You should be talking to each other. Hey, what can we do? And I saw that on the sideline, during the workouts they're having. I could see they made a point to do that. You got to be talking to each other, and that's something that needs to happen. And you didn't see that really with the coaches either. When they were having their problems, I didn't see them on the sideline trying to work things out. What can we do? You're talking to your receivers. Hey, what can you run on that guy? How can you get open? This is part of the game. You don't have everybody sitting over in a corner somewhere. No, the thing you want to do is be talking to each other. And, Nick says that all the time. Well, they weren't doing it very well last year. When they were getting to when they're having trouble, guys are, dragging over there, sitting. You didn't see anybody over there talking, trying to see, well, what can we do? What adjustment can we make? And, a good quarterback is over there with his receiver saying, hey, look, what route can you run and beat this guy? What is he doing? What is he showing you? And it's something, that any sport, you got to communicate with each other. And I saw them doing that during those workouts. And I expect them to be doing that a lot more this year because they got veteran guys. And when you're veterans, you've seen a lot of things. So you can talk to each other. You can make adjustments right during the game. In fact, almost during the play, you can make adjustments if you're communicating with each other and you stay on the same page. And that's what I expect to see this year. And even if you lose a game, you got to be communicating with each other. Hey, what did we do wrong? What can we do? And it's almost like when you get players that are seasoned, the coach is really secondary. The guys are coaching themselves. everybody already knows what you did wrong on that play, you know. And if you're a veteran player, a lot of times you already know. You know what the coach is going to say before you even get to the sideline, because you know what you did wrong, you know. So that's what I expect to see, because they got seasoned guys, especially on their offense. Come on, look at all the experience they have there. And I would want to come over there with a pointed shoe boot and kick everybody up the butt if they don't do a better job of talking to each other this year and make adjustments, because it's ridiculous. Come on. Going like, you didn't just get in the league.
By the way, now that Kelsey can speak freely, Cobb, I don't know if you saw it, but he said he hadn't looked at a playbook in 10 years. Now he's an offensive lineman. Yeah. He's doing the same thing with Jeff Stoutland. But he was like on his podcast, he said, yeah, I haven't looked at one in 10 years. And Travis is looking at him like he's nuts, because Travis is involved in the passing game. It's a big difference. But I thought it was hilarious when Jason let people in on that. And that's where I want to go with you, because you mentioned 11 years in the NFL. You got all the helmets up there. Detroit, I see the Eagles. I see the Cowboys. I see SC. By the way, I think I know what your favorite helmet is, and it's not the NFL teams. I could be wrong, but I think it's SC. When you show up at training camp next week, what is the difference when you guys did 2-a-days back in the day? I mean, it's unbelievable, Cobb. Unbelievable, the difference.
You know, we can't get together like anything with the former players. Guys are just going off about, you know, of course, the differences in training camp now as compared to what we went through with training camp. And really, to be honest with you, I think that that we over practice, and you know, now they under practice, if you ask me, because back, you know, years ago when I was playing, you know, one of the teams that had success and was winning Super Bowls all the time, they didn't practice like everybody else. That's the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
You know, they worked on the detail. You know, they did some hitting and everything, but they didn't overdo it. We overdid it. We killed each other. I mean, we were going live against each other 4 and 5 times a week, you know, basically playing full games, you know, each day and just killing each other. And then we go into the start of the season and guys were kind of worn down. And I'll tell you, I'm going to tell a little bit on a buddy of mine, but Mike Quick. Okay. Now, Mike was ahead of the game.
Yeah, Mike tells this story all the time. Yeah.
Look, Mike used to tell his agent, look, I'm holding out. I'm not going to be available to such and such date.
Yeah.
And whatever you need to do, I want you to stall, whatever, tell them whatever reason, use whatever you want, but I'm not going in until this date. And then he's out running routes, you know, and he would come into the season every year. He would start off with a 150, 200-yard game because his legs were fresh. He was ready to go. And we're all worn down because we've been in the training camp for however many weeks. And just with that alone shows you that we were doing too much hitting. We were wearing each other out rather than to start the season. Now the Eagles have taken this over to the other side of it.
Yeah.
But you know, you can't do too much. And
Mike's very proud of that. Mike loves that. Mike was ahead of the game. Yeah, he loves telling that story.
He was ahead of the game. And the thing about it is he comes in. We've been killing ourselves. And like I said, he starts off with 160, 200-yard game. He's bouncing around. His legs are fresh and everything. And but he was right. And you can overdo it. So you don't want to overdo it at the same time. You know, guys need some hitting, and they need to be running their routes, and they need to be sharp. And you know, you got to put in some work, consistent work, in order to be at that state of your game. And they need to start off fast. So, and that offense, I'm thinking, you know, I want to see you averaging 31 points a game or something like that. I mean, they got a lot of weapons.
I'll tell you, G, man, there are a lot of expectations on poor Kellen Moore.
I know.
I mean, everybody thinks this is a stinking all-star team and it's going to be easy. And
no, it's not, because they got to get used to playing with each other. And so I would cut them some slack. I don't want to take it too far, but they do have a lot of weapons. And if they, can, get in sync, and I do like the fact that I see a lot more motion, and from what those guys were saying, they're giving the wide receivers a lot of freedom to do different things, but they just got to make sure they're on the same page. Now, they weren't lighting things up there in that camp. So hopefully, I know they've been working out with each other and everything, but they got all of the weapons, they got all of the talent, and hopefully they'll get in sync because, offense has got to be on the same page, and even more so than the defense, because a lot of times defensively, you can do things aggressively and just mess up a play and somebody was out of position, but because you have one guy went in there and blew the play up, you can get away with mistakes, but you got to play aggressively. But offensively, if you're not on the same page, you might as well take it home because you're not gonna play well.
Jay, let's talk about the engine of that offense, Jalen Hurts. How confident are you in Jalen Hurts coming back this year? Obviously, MVP caliber player in 22, small regression last year. How confident are you in Hurts coming into this year?
I feel good about it. I think that he has got to be communicating with his coaches, and as I said, he's got to be open. And he's got to be open to, talking to AJ, talking to Devontae, with Dallas Goedert, making sure, because, as a quarterback, a lot of times you got to keep everybody happy too. Because, of course, a lot of guys want the ball every play. You can't do that. But, you give them the BS. Hey, look, man, I'm coming to you, whatever. You got to keep everybody happy. So on the sideline, good quarterbacks, you'll see them. They're talking to the guys because you do want to make sure they feel that, hey, you're looking for them. And so Jalen, he definitely needs to play better, but a lot of it is going to be based on his communications with Kellen Moore, by letting him know what he likes, and how he feels about, the game plan and everything. And he's getting to the point where he's got enough experience, especially with all of the offenses he's played in, to where he can give his opinion, what he likes, what he doesn't like, what he thinks will work, and I think this is going to be a challenging year for him. But with the talent that they have, I'm expecting a lot. Yeah, I am expecting a big year out of him, and I think he can get things back together and really have a big year. So we will see.
At Gary Cobb, 2 R's. If you want to follow G Cobb on X, Twitter, gcobb.com, you can see him there. Fox 29, Fox 29 locally in Philadelphia. We get a lot of international listeners as well. So if you're local, you can see G there. Nick Sirianni, got to end it there with you. A lot of people around this league thinks Nick is coaching for his job. And we know the shelf life, everybody's got a shelf life in this league. Yeah. Everybody's renting space. You as a player, all the coaches, even us media people, everybody's renting space. Nobody owns anything. Everybody's got that shelf life. Is that where you are with Nick Sirianni? He got a mulligan. He's got to perform this year, or it's on to the next chapter.
Yeah, I think he's probably at that point. I mean, and he's in a tough situation because, if anything, he kind of got a demotion. I mean, to not really be running the offense or the defense, that's tough. And he's in a situation where he's really, got some pressure on him. So the big thing he needs to do is, wherever you're at, you can learn at the NFL. Now he should. I'm sure he's taking in a lot of what Kellen Moore is going to be doing offensively, and he should have some input. And even if you are not really running everything, you still should be able to contribute. And so he's got to have a good attitude. I mean, because you could see where he could get the kind of attitude where he's almost wanting things to mess up. So they got to depend on him. But he's got to have a good attitude, go in there and work with Kellen Moore, and those guys work together and make sure that this team plays well. And a lot of that's going to depend on him, having the right kind of attitude. And I take my hat off to him, because it's not easy to really probably coach in the situation he's in.
Gary, a lot of anticipation coming up for this season, man. Everybody's waiting to see what the Philadelphia Eagles will do. A lot of hype, a lot of excitement. Yeah, they better win. You're right. You said it, man. 31 points on offense. The expectations for this team are sky high, as they should be. Very good roster, very good team. So we'll see how they do this year. G Cobb, thanks for joining Birds 365 today, man. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks, bud.
There's Gary Cobb joining us on Birds 365. Great to talk to former player, 11-year NFL player, Gary Cobb. Good stuff from G Cobb. John, what'd you take away from what Gary had to say?
Yeah, we started with the linebackers as we should, and that's been the theme of the show. Is Gary's a former linebacker for the younger people, 11 years, as he mentioned, in the NFL. Different era, which a lot of guys, we get into this with Seth as well. I mean, almost a completely different position. In Gary's day, usually had 3 linebackers on the field. It was much more physical game, much more about run support. Now it's about athleticism. It's about guys in space. As G Cobb kind of explained, you're always getting matched up with receivers. Everybody's trying to spread you out. And, this debate on devaluing the position, the good teams have good linebackers. And that G said they still got to make plays. So I agree with Howie to a point about devaluing the position. But, man, I mean, look at Baltimore's linebackers. Look at San Francisco's linebackers. And look what happened when they lost Greenlaw in the Super Bowl. I don't know.
That's what drives me the most crazy about it, is that, like, running backs, Howie's right, where, like, you look across the league and there are teams that have tremendous success without going and signing a big running back. Even Patrick Mahomes, who has Isaiah Pacheco, who I think was a late 6th or 7th round pick. Seventh round pick, Isaiah Pacheco. Now, he's a good player. I'm just saying, linebacker, it's really not the same. I mean, you look around at the best players in the league, at best teams in the league, and you're like, yeah, they got pretty good linebackers. Yeah. So that's where I don't really get the evaluation.
Yeah. And it really comes down to more of, like, the Eagles are searching for good line. It's not like they're not searching for good linebackers. And that's why you criticize them when they hit on one of them, not an initial massive investment, TJ Edwards. That's where the mistake came. That when you get a good player, keep a good player. And they've invested in Nakobe and Davion Taylor recently as 3rd round picks. Davion didn't work out. Nakobe hasn't worked out to this point. So you got to hit it. I mean, Fred Warner was a 3rd round pick. Drake Greenlaw, I believe, was a 5th. So, but the difference is, all right, San Francisco hit on those linebackers and then they paid them when they turned into good players. That's where the Eagles have differed. Not that every 3rd round pick or every 5th round or day 3 pick is going to, and maybe Jeremiah Trotter Jr. hits. Probably going to take a little bit of a while, but if he does, are you going to pay him in that second deal? History says they're not. That's maybe where the Eagles have made the mistake.
Yeah, we'll see how it all plays out. Good stuff from Gary Cobb. I thought it was interesting what he said about Jalen Hurts, too. He kind of wants him to be that more vocal leader. We've talked about that many times this summer, where you don't want to change him too much. But Gary Cobb is definitely looking for more vocal leadership from Jalen Hurts. So I thought that was interesting. We will see what that looks like. Just 4 days away, everybody. 4 freaking days away until the Philadelphia Eagles report to camp. Next Wednesday, we'll have a different show schedule, so we'll update you on that on Monday and Tuesday. Johnny Mac, great shows this week, brother. Have a great weekend. Hopefully get outside a little bit before we start up on this training camp. Enjoy your weekend, brother. I'll talk to you on Monday. All right, sir?
All right. Sounds good. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for
gearing up.
What's that?
We're gearing up for
next week. Yes, we are. Absolutely. No doubt about it. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. Make sure you guys hit the like on your way out. Stay tuned. The National Football Show coming up at 2 p.m. today. Appreciate you all being here. I'll see you on Monday on Birds 365.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.